Hi, I'm Barney Butterfield, and I started Sandford Orchards cider 20 years ago this harvest. So this is my 20th pile of apples. The apple pile has got bigger every year because people keep drinking all the cider we make. So something's going right, and that comes from the environment we're in. So we're in the heart of mid-Devon on the beautiful rich red soil which grows the most tasty cider apples in the world. And so our job is not to ruin that beautiful apple by making sure we make the cider well. And I'm going to show you how we do that over the next few minutes. We're really proud to make our cider in the oldest working cider works in the country. We actually took this over in 2014, and I started my journey 20 years ago, making cider as a farm labourer and making a drop of cider to supplement my wages because I couldn't go to the pub as often as I wanted on £3 an hour. But what happened is my mates in the rugby team I was playing for drank it all before the end of the summer, so I had to make more. And I've been making more every year. But as you can see from the building behind me, I didn't come up with the idea. The history of cider in the west of England goes back, well, certainly 2,000 years, and likely before that. The apple is a beautifully flavoursome, sweet fruit, and it produces a glorious drink. And we're really proud to be just part of the long chain that's handed that knowledge down. Good cider is a reward in itself, and hopefully, if you discover it, you'll agree with me. You can see this beautiful old building. By the way, this building was built in 6 weeks. 6 weeks, which is incredible to think. This is back in the 30s, into war. In those days, you'll see big piles of apples here because we collect up the apples, we put them in trailers, and we tip the trailers into our apple bays. In those days, all apples were picked into bags. So picked into those old West of England sacks, they're known as, which you'd probably know because you've probably done the sack race in it at school, but they're big, unforgiving bags. And they would have been loaded up on a long wooden platform outside this wall, and then passed through these windows, tipped through here, onto conveyors, and then pressed. All pressed by hand in those days. The milled apples wrapped in cloth and stacked one on top of the other, and then a huge hydraulic ram came up and squashed all the juice out. We use exactly the same principle on the press you'll see in a minute, but instead of a stack of cloth, we've got a cloth press that continues moving, and we put the mashed apple in between the cloth, and then it goes through a series of rollers. And if you imagine a mangle, that's exactly how our press works. Just some air pressure squashes the juice through the cloth, we collect it, and we pump it away to ferment it. What you've got here is these are the apples at the end of the pressing process. We've taken all the juice out. That lovely orange colour, that rich burnished orange, that's because they're real cider apples. If that was an eating apple or a cooking apple, that would still be green. That orange is tannin. Probably, if you're a cider lover, you're probably a tannin lover. So if you love cider, I'll bet you love good marmalade, I bet you love a proper cup of tea, and probably good red wine. And that's all because of that fantastic tingle you get under your tongue, and that comes from tannin. It's a rich, strong antioxidant, and it gives it that lovely prickle and that lovely astringency. So really important that you make cider out of cider apples. Not everyone knows there's such a thing as a cider apple, but without it, we don't have a cider company. So we're choosing from between 70 different varieties, maybe more, coming in from our orchards, all of them only ever grown to press into cider apple juice for making a cider. Now, this big pile of squashed apples hasn't finished its journey yet. This is going to go up the road to a biodigester, and they re-ferment this. They take the cellulose, they break that down into two gases, methane gas, which they can burn, and carbon dioxide. Now, all of the fermentation produces that. The really cool thing about these guys is they capture the carbon dioxide, and we buy it back, and we use it to put the bubbles in our cider. It's important to know that you pick a cider apple up, not off a tree, because we want all of the sugars, and we want a completely ripe apple. So we want to, and then because we pick them up and we use machines, we could occasionally pick up a stone, and that would smash our mill. So we float our apples in because stones don't float. This water here is cleaning the fruit as it goes, but it's just the rainwater off our roofs, and then we simply we pump it round in a circle. So there's a big pit under our press, and we're just pumping that water around just to move the fruit. When the fruit comes to its final milling, we wash it with potable water to make sure we've got a lovely clean apple when it hits the mill. So what you've got in shot there is a new storage tank. So when we make cider, the fermenting bit is quite a short story. It's a couple of weeks, maybe a month. But then we store the cider finished and dry in big vats to mature. Cider is a long matured, full flavored product, and so it needs time to appreciate and increase those flavors. And so you have to have a lot of tanks, because you see the big piles of apple pumice, you see the big piles of apples. That's because 6 weeks of a cider maker's life is chaos, because we're bringing the fruit from our orchards, we're extracting all the juice, we're getting it all prepared and fermenting in the tanks, and then the rest of the year we're quietly allowing it to mature, we're bottling the ready cider, and that's how the cider process works. We're just like a vineyard, but it's apples, not grapes. So what happens here is that this conveyor is going up, and that leaf you see has just gone up. It won't let something that's not round roll down it. Right. So you get rid of a lot of the trash. We still got someone standing there who's picking out the fruit that they don't like. So you always have someone who is making sure that nothing, even if it is round and hard, still only great fruit is ending up in the sun. You'll never make good cider from bad apples. Never. Straight off the press, we go into these fermenters, and that's where the primary fermentation, where we change sugar into alcohol. We've got some cooling jackets on these because we want slow, cool fermentation and not high temperature. So we're careful to make sure that it doesn't get too warm, get more flavour from a cool fermentation. When it's finished fermenting, we rack it off into the rest of our storage tanks. You'll notice around the cider works there's an awful lot of stainless steel. As in winemaking, the great thing about stainless steel is that you lock in the fruit flavours and you don't allow in oxygen. So we talked about turning the sugar into alcohol. That's the primary result of fermentation. The next thing that will happen is alcohol will be turned into vinegar by the air. So you need to lock out any oxygen. Wood allows some oxygen to come through. So being very careful using wood produces really interesting flavors, but using it for too long or too much is a big problem. So we have to be very careful how much we use, because we want all those lovely fruit-forward richness that you get from the cider apple, and we don't want it to deteriorate. So because we're keeping it for so long, how you keep it and look after it will make a huge difference on the quality of your cider. In the old days, it was always in big vats. Now the good thing about a big vat, the bigger it is, like the General, the less oxygen there is, penetration, compared to a little one like this. So we will only put our cider in small vats like this for particularly interesting blends that we're doing, maybe for 6 months, because cider doesn't have the alcohol content of wine. Wine is so much higher in alcohol that the risk of oxidation is much lower. With cider, it's a much lighter drink, So it's much riskier to put it for any length of time in something like a wooden cask. So we use it for its flavour. This is cherry wood, those are oak. So we're using it for flavour, but for a much shorter period of time. This is our biggest tank that we've just had fitted. It's not filled yet, and it's to store it's to store our cider so that we can then bottle and keg throughout the year. This particular tank, if you had a pint every day, then you'd have to live for 1,000 years before you could finish it. Give it a slap and feel the reverb, because when you then feel it when it's full, when you hold your hand on a full vat, you feel that you feel 100 tons of cider talking to your back. It's very satisfying. The bottles then feed through into the labeler, where the label is wound on. That's a sticky label. So we're in the orchard at the height of cider harvest, and if you check your calendar, it's the 28th of October. Now, if people think about their apple trees at home in their gardens, then a lot of the fruit is long gone, but cider fruit hangs on, and we want to wait until the fruit is on the floor of the orchard, because that is when the tree has given it the most amount of energy and flavour and sweetness. Because you've seen what we do to apples when they reach the cider mill. They get smashed up and pulped up, and we just want the juice. So we don't mind a little bruise from the harvesting machine. We don't mind a little bruise as an apple hits the orchard floor, because what we want is flavour. That's what these trees have been doing. They've been soaking up the sunshine for the whole of the summer, and you can even see now cider apple trees are still covered in leaf, and that leaf is energy, and that leaf is sweetness and flavour. So that's what we're harvesting. We harvest sunshine from the summer, and it's concentrated in apples that we crush in the autumn. Wait for the fruit to fall, pick it up. So if you're going to make cider at home, don't get tempted, don't pull those apples off the tree. Let them hit the deck, and you will thank me later, because all of that flavour is the thing that you want in your glass at the end of the day.